Tonight, the world is waiting for any sign of international trouble after the U.S. ordered the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston.
This comes on the heels of claims that China is sponsoring or protecting spies, hacking both the U.S. government and corporate America. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips joins us with more. Eric?
Well, John and Jenna, right after the order to close the consulate came reports of workers burning documents and metal barrels there. Now, the man in charge says it's standard procedure for foreign compounds, diplomatic compounds, to burn internal documents before leaving a foreign post. But the quick action is raising suspicion.
The latest move in this looming showdown between superpowers shook up the Chinese consul general.
You're very
Yeah. I'm surprised and angry.
The Trump administration order said the Houston consulate must close by Friday, accusing Beijing of massive spying.
Are you saying the State Department is lying?
I didn't mention that. I think if you want to make accusation for us, give us some evidence.
The order follows a grand jury indictment of 2 Chinese nationals for hacking into American pharmaceutical and biotech companies. While records show the men have been after intellectual property for more than a decade, the most recent charge is related to coveted coronavirus vaccine information. Senator Marco Rubio called the consulate a spy shop.
It's kind of the central node of a massive spy operation, commercial espionage, defense espionage, also influence agents to try to influence Congress.
It has been long discussed and asserted that the office here in Houston was engaged in inappropriate forms of information gathering and influence operations. It's not necessarily surprising. One would expect foreign governments to be very aggressive in collecting information that would be helpful to their own national interests.
China calls the closure a political provocation, and experts predict retaliation.
It is important to note that China, certainly from the perspective of the Trump administration, is a true economic and global power. So getting into a conflict with China, I think raises some questions as to what the next step might be.
And some predict the next step will be China closing the American consulate in Wuhan, where the outbreak of the coronavirus began. But how this will all end is something of great speculation and concern. John and Jenna.
All right, thank you, Eric. Joining us now, Dean Chang, Senior Research Fellow with the Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Dean, thanks for being with us this afternoon. Let's start off right there where Eric left off. China called this move malicious slander and said that it, quote, breaks down the bridge of friendship between the Chinese and Americans. So where do things go from here? Are we in for escalation?
It's not clear whether we'll be in for escalation, but I would certainly expect a reciprocal shutdown. As your correspondent noted, there's been some discussion about whether the Wuhan consulate would go. It would be in some ways the easiest because the U.S. actually shut down that consulate once COVID-19 had permeated the city. What I don't think is going to happen is some kind of military action on either side.
Dean, what do you make of the document burn at the Chinese consulate in Houston? Of course, speculation they were burning evidence confirming spying.
Well, the U.S. State Department only gave the consulate apparently a few hours' notice that they would have to leave by Friday. Any consulate, any diplomatic establishment is going to have a lot of sensitive information, not all of which will be intelligence. For example, they will have copies of cables that were sent from China to the embassies and to the consulates. Not all of that, in turn, is going to be very easily removed, especially if you only have a few days' notice. So it is fairly typical to burn sensitive documents that don't have to be intelligence related, in the sense that they're reports from your spies. That being said, given the State Department's reference to theft of intellectual property and espionage, it's certainly possible that there are, in fact, various records, indications, clues that might be used to figure out who is working for China.
Dean, you recently wrote a piece about China's wolf warrior diplomat, saying that China intends to play a major role shaping the post-COVID-19 world. Can you talk about what may be in store?
What we have already seen is a much more assertive Chinese diplomatic corps. Most famously, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said COVID-19 was actually something perhaps that the U.S. brought to China. Other Chinese diplomats have said that rather than criticizing China, the world should be thanking China for its prompt action regarding COVID-19. We've seen them in Europe lecture, for example, the Swedes saying, "You are a featherweight, we're a heavyweight. Don't get into a fight with us." So around the world, we are seeing diplomatic moves. We're also seeing some military moves. China-India border has seen now soldiers killed over the borders. The South China Sea has long been a cockpit of tension. So what we're seeing is a much more assertive China, whether it's diplomatically, in the intelligence world, in the military world, and of course economically.
Dean, how should the U.S. respond to counter a dominant China?
Well, I think that the Chinese in some ways are sort of following Stalin's observation about how to use a bayonet. When you're probing, if you hit something soft, keep pushing. If you hit something hard, pull back. I think the United States needs to make very clear our principles, our positions, what we are not prepared to compromise on. This administration, to its credit, has made very clear to China that intellectual property is one of those focal points. The whole point of the trade war and the tariffs is about getting China to stop its theft of intellectual property.
All right, Dean Cheng of the Heritage Foundation, we have to leave it there. Really interesting topic. We appreciate you joining us today with your great insights. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.